Okay.
Ed, great to see you. And
Wonderful to be here, Paul. Thank you.
thanks for coming on. Much appreciated. So, Ed, I want to kick off with something that is a little bit provocative. You basically think that most people get leadership completely wrong. Tell us what you mean by that, and why do you think that that's the case? Because that's a pretty big, bold statement.
No, absolutely. I think when we look at leadership in organizations, and especially how we develop leaders, we're bad at it. We're very
Yeah.
poor at making the change happen and building it because knowing isn't the same thing as building capacity to execute, especially under pressure.
Yeah. So, and tell me how you're tackling that. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. You see an awful lot of people that are very good at talking, sometimes very good at writing essays, very good at passing exams. They're not necessarily people that are very good at getting stuff done, are they? So tell us I mean, what's your thoughts on how you address that issue? Because it's not a simple issue.
No, it's not a simple issue. The real challenge is when we look at how we develop people, how we develop leaders in organizations, emotional intelligence, psychological safety. We need to bring these programs in. But that's not the same as giving people the ability to use those skills, especially when it counts. When we get stressed out, when problems occur, when we're in crisis mode, we find ourselves immediately going back to old habits because the stress peaks, the brain shuts down, and we go back to what we're used to, what we're trained on.
And what would you suggest needs to be changed about that? If you think about your average, I don't know, MBA program or management development program, I mean, in very broad terms, what sort of things would you like to change about that? And again, they're complicated programs, aren't they? So there's probably
Oh,
quite a lot that needs altering.
there's a lot that needs altering, but I think it comes down to we see two broad places where it comes down to. There's the learning and execution gap, where we're really good at training everything we need to know, but we're not good at building the automatic responses to that training. And so, building into the program the measured practice, the measured training to give ourselves the skills that when we're in crisis mode, we actually have new skills to fall back on versus all of that just goes out the window.
Mm.
The
And
other
let me ask
side,
you, sorry, let me ask you about that. And do you mean just when we go into crisis mode, or do you mean more generally? Because my observation would be is that people often go on training courses and they come back and then within a relatively short period of time, they've completely forgotten what they've learned. So they're still carrying on doing mostly what they were doing previously.
oh, exactly. And that's an even worse example of it because I see that too.
Yeah.
And if we want to build that incremental change in, yes, we need to reinforce those habits. We need to build those skills over time. But also, especially the big piece is we can reinforce it over time and get people practicing these things in a controlled environment when things are on the level, when life is smooth. But if we don't do that for when the bumps happen, that's really what sets people back. And that's where all the big challenge of being able to think fast, being able to be adaptable, really, really comes to bear. It's frustrating enough to see what people, oh, they go to the training, oh, I know what emotional intelligence is now, but they're not more emotionally intelligent people.
Mm.
If we want to make more emotionally intelligent people, we have to set the environment, we have to set the standards, we have to give them the practice and the mentorship in order to get to that point. And then we need to get it to the point where it's an anchor for them, where it's something that is intrinsic to them, not just a 10-second thought before they resend an email or they provide feedback to some of their people.
Mm. And I mean, let me pick up a specific thing there. So one of the things I see is, and this is an observation about what's happening. About I'm not trying to be critical of the universities, but what you see is people doing professional development. Let's say an MBA, as a for instance. I do some stuff with the local university to help them with their MBA.
Mhm.
When the course comes to an end, there's no incentive for the university to do anything else. I mean, the person has then left, they've got their MBA or whatever the qualification is that they're doing, and they've probably had a good time and they've learned loads of useful stuff. But then it seems to me that there's a kind of a cliff edge there where they then go off to an employer, and
Mhm.
the employer may or may not, and probably mostly may not, have programs to continue that development. I mean, some very good companies have got those programs in place, but lots of
Mhm.
companies haven't. I mean, how do you? I mean, it's one thing to say we need to create the opportunity for practice to people to practice and develop those skills. How do you change that in practice? Because those, I mean, the universities have no incentive. I mean, they don't get any more money. They don't get any more benefits from doing those things. I mean, and companies may or may not have those incentives. If they want to keep people for a long time, they probably have. But if they're not
Mhm.
that bothered about keeping them, maybe not. I mean, how do you tackle that sort of problem? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I love the university environment. I'm here at Babson College, just outside of Boston. I teach organizational behavior. And when I have a class full of freshmen, we spend the entire year not only talking about organizational behavior topics around emotional intelligence, resiliency, but we put it into practice. And they basically have, through the course of this class, the opportunity to create their own ventures. We fund them. They go out, source, sell, market, account, all the different business functions until the end of the year. The purpose of that is that's the vehicle for them to train on all those emotional intelligence
Right.
pieces.
Okay.
And it is a quote unquote safe environment for them to experiment. And throughout that process, they're given time to reflect. The papers they write for me are, hey, based on this and this interaction, here are the organizational behavior pieces I saw at play. Here's how it impacts the result of that. Did we understand each other? Did we not? Were we displaying emotional intelligence? Were we not? Was the psychological safety? Whatever piece there was of that. And then what do we do next time? The final piece of that reflection is always their action plan. So the next time they find themselves in that situation, they have a moderate blueprint on how do we bring these habits back. And for me, the university is the perfect time to build that. I'm well aware, though, that my program is entirely unique here in the US. Babson, we've hit top tier status because we are so different in the way we teach in experiential education. I would love to see that model continuing because the universities are the ultimate place for people to practice
Yeah.
and to build habits and to understand so that when they come into an organization afterwards, they have the skills. And there's impetus and results for the universities as well, because more engaged alumni are going to be more successful, are going to have fonder memories of the way that their institution prepared them, and they're going to continue those alumni links, and they're going to continue to be those sources for the university to build out new programs, to bring in that's and help and receive the benefit of that success of their alums.
I mean, I'm a fan of experiential learning. I mean, it seems to me to be very, very important. What I'm not sure about, and this is the thing that um, interests me, is how you transfer that. I mean, it's great to hear what you're doing in a university. I mean, that's a step forward from a lot of the stuff that goes on, in my view, when it's
Mhm.
simply people study a subject, write an essay, have a discussion with some other students. Nothing wrong with those things.
No,
But
no,
to me, it'd be not enough, really, for a modern. I mean,
no.
in an environment where AI is changing things so quickly, I mean, one of my questions is how do you bridge the gap between the sorts of things that you're talking about and employers needing
Mhm.
to have employees that can adapt quickly, that can change, that can deal with all the things that I mean, just to pick one example, that AI is kind of throwing up at the moment.
Mhm.
I mean, somebody said to me the other day, we're seeing sort of 10 years change happening in a 2 year period at the moment because of AI. Now,
Mhm.
that's perhaps a little bit of an exaggeration, but it does illustrate the speed with which things are changing in the workplace. What are your thoughts on how you bridge that gap? It's
Oh,
great
no,
what
no.
you're doing within the university. How do you engage employers in that? I suppose is my
Yes.
question.
That is the second great trap we have, and that's that dramatic change trap, where we know that learning and execution needs to carry on. The second piece is the world's changing quickly, and we need our people
Yeah.
to be more resilient, more adaptable now. This is neurobiology. This is people and neuroplasticity at play, which takes time to implement, which takes
Yeah.
time to change. And so being able to create that is A, understand that it's a long-term game. If we're really going to build this in our organization, we have to be intentional for the long haul. And but the good part about that is this is micro changes. These aren't big changes we need to make in organizations. These aren't major pieces that we have to shift. So when we look at, yes, we need to change that, what are the small incremental steps? And especially, and this is something I love about it all, is my background's military. And so we train, execute. And the business world is constantly executing, and training is sidelined and formulative.
Yeah.
So what has to happen is we have to build into our processes those little pieces that enable the training in the moment. Is there a way to conduct what we call after action reviews, or AARs, during midstream, so that I'm not talking like agile and going and having the scrum meetings or any of that. This is something when we're done with the task, 3 quick questions. What was done well? What didn't go so well? How do we fix it next time? And every single time we go through, we build it. It's a 5-minute conversation, if that. And building that habit is what builds the learning, is what builds the emotional intelligence, what builds the openness and the safety within the organization, where people see that this is a part of the way we do things. It's built into and baked into our processes. Now we're adaptable for the long run. Now we can see and have that upwards communication like, hey, wait a minute, we're seeing some changes here where there's a whole lot of AI and it's impacting our work streams. Hey, wait a minute, what's actually happening there? And you can have the time to build up the evidence and have the time to say, okay, what are we getting challenged with here? What have we not thought about as we're building these tools into our organizations? How are we handling cybersecurity? How are we handling info security? How are we making sure that our people are well trained on using this effectively and not just another tool to churn out some whatever?
I mean, it's interesting you mention after action reviews. I mean, I'm a fan of that process. I mean, one of the things we talked about last time was how in the military they spend a lot of time training, and they don't do a lot of implementation, but when they do it really well and in very difficult circumstances. I mean, they don't have wars all the time, and they have to go and deal with very difficult circumstances. So inevitably, there's a lot of training to prepare people for almost any eventuality. And then the AAR, the after action review, creates the feedback loop, doesn't it? It creates the ability for people to say, actually, if I was going to do it again, I'd do it a slightly different way, because industry doesn't, well, that's not true. Some big companies like Toyota are very good at things like that, but a lot of companies aren't so good at that. Why is it? And I mean, I'm interested in your view on this. Why is it that something that's so simple, which is about an after action review feedback loop, it's not a complicated thing, but you don't see it very often in businesses? I mean, why is that not happening so much? I mean, what's your take on that?
It's risky. It's risky, and people worry
Risky
about.
Sorry, let me just put risky in what way? Because it seems to me it's pretty risky not to do it in the current
Oh,
environment.
it's incredibly
When you
risky
say
not to
it's
do it. And
risky,
that's
what do you mean?
but the perception is that this is going to be time. What if our people aren't trained right? What if
Yeah.
the suggestions are bad? And it can get what if to death at the executive and senior level, where giving people that level of agency is a risk. And not giving them is, and saying that here's the structure, here's the process, here's what you do. Boom. This means our processes become a little bit more fluid. It becomes, we need to build our people are competent. We need to build the competency of our people so that they can provide good objective feedback, which is a whole other skill to develop and train in them. The first couple of rounds of this are always ugly. And so bypassing that and helping people understand that this is a part of the process, that it's another skill we have to learn to provide good constructive feedback, to be able to report on the usually unreported, to be able to think outside the box and see how other pieces are affecting our policies and procedures. And then to be able to, from an executive perspective, to have the humility to say, oh, wait, that's actually things we can implement. Because one of the fastest things that shuts this down is if somebody starts trying to suggest things, or employees start expecting change because they've provided some feedback in a direction, and it gets shot down. And especially if it gets shot down without any transparency, that those programs are done as soon as that happens. And so it requires a lot of emotional intelligence on the leadership side, where you have to be willing to adapt, where you have to be willing to take some feedback from areas where you might not be willing to, otherwise what you're used to.
Yeah. And you need to create I mean, to use the kind of the buzzword of the moment, to create a psychologically safe workspace,
Yes.
which is one thing to say do that. It's a bit easier, bit more difficult to do, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean,
Oh, it is. It's incredibly difficult to do. And that, you know, it's going past the buzzwords of, oh, we're going to be psychologically safe, is what are the instruments for psychological
yeah,
safety? It means that people are willing to express opinions. It means people are willing to step up and voice opinions. It means people are willing to have some agency and make some change within their lanes. And all of that from a business perspective is, it's risky. What happens if somebody changes the process and it doesn't work? Well, now we have issues because we might be missing work. I mean, we can look at lost revenue, increased costs, or whatever other macro pieces are going to come out of that. And so to be able to give people the confidence where the changes they make are going to be effective and not just knee-jerk reactions to something is a whole other area that we need. And this is why that gradualism is such an important
yeah.
piece,
I
is
mean,
it helps build it over time.
it's interesting that the after action review kind of model has been so successful in the military. I mean,
Mhm.
because people would perceive, perhaps wrongly sometimes, that the military is purely command and control. You
Oh,
know, the general says this, the major does that, the captain does this, the sergeant does that, and off we go and, da 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 da. I mean, it's not quite like that though, is it? And it's been
no,
very successful. My understanding is it's been very successful as a model for improving the way the military operate. I mean, in terms of their success, their ability to deal with all the, the fog of war, if you like. I mean, but
certainly.
it's interesting. It's been successful in what people would perceive to be a command and control environment. Yet in small businesses, you don't really see that, and you would think it would be easier. I mean, what's your take on why it's worked in the military and it isn't so successful in business? I mean, just give us your thoughts on that.
We have thousands of years of military science that backs this up. I mean, this was the way
Yeah,
the Roman centurions trained and grew. And what it is I was an infantry sergeant. I had my squad of 12 guys, and my lane was my lane. How I employed those two teams of individuals was entirely up to me to facilitate whatever my mission was that I got from my company commander, that he got from his battalion, and so on and so
yeah,
forth. The general is just there to make sure we're in the right spot at the right time and we have everything we need to accomplish our goals. He is the ultimate logistician. They are the big picture on, hey, we need these elements here because this is what we expect to happen based on the order of battle. That is a very difficult, high level of strategic thinking.
Hmm.
And so frequently in business is people can't get out of their own way. And we see people working in the business rather than on the business.
yeah.
Being on the business is being very strategic with how you're developing it, how you're deploying it, how you're engaging different markets, areas, and everything else. If you're worried about the day-to-day problems, you can't take that big picture perspective and
Yeah.
shift into, for lack of a better word, that general mindset.
I mean,
Where,
it's very interesting you see that because I see that all the time. People struggling to take a bit of to create the space to stand back and think about where they're going rather than how they're doing what they need to do today. But the other thing that's interesting about what you said is it's about how you delegate.
Mhm.
Because what you described was delegating outcomes.
Yes.
So what you were given was we need to, I don't know,
Take this
raise
out.
that hill or whatever. You're delegating an outcome. You're not saying, and this is how you're going to do every single piece. And
Mhm.
often the way people delegate, if they're untrained or if they haven't developed that skill, is they delegate and then they want to tell people how to do everything rather than saying, okay, I want you to achieve this. I'm less concerned about the exact way that you do that. Is that a fair summary of that
Oh,
issue?
it's an incredibly accurate summary because
Mm.
working with managers, working with leaders and organizations, people are terrified to delegate. And effective delegation, to go back to a military example here, Eisenhower's plan for D-Day that he gave to his corps commanders was one page.
Yeah.
It was one page long saying, these are what all of you, these are your areas to attack. These are your areas that you're going to go into. Make it happen. And they had filtered down so much through the American and British and Canadian GIs at the time how to go about that, how those units were going to deploy, what that landing would look like. Eisenhower didn't need to worry about any of that. That was all handled at the unit level. And so being able to have that effective training and that effectiveness means he could more easily say, this is what you're doing, go and make it happen. Same thing with business leaders. This is why that gradual training is so important, because that's how you build the trust.
Yeah.
That's how you build the competency that you don't have, that you can effectively delegate. Because again, delegating is scary. Every new leader I've worked with struggles with it because they've been very good at that lane, they've been very good at that job, and now I need to tell somebody else to do it. I need to trust that that outcome is going to be of the quality as if I did it myself.
Yeah.
Is
I
it
mean,
at first?
yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, I read Eisenhower's biography a while ago, and it's very interesting when you read it with hindsight. You know, there's that phrase, you know, everybody liked Ike.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was, and to come back to your earlier point about psychological safety. I mean, obviously I never met him, but I get the impression from his biography that he was the kind of leader where you could come and talk about stuff
Mhm.
without feeling like you were going to get, shot down. So he could. I suspect. I don't know whether it's true for certain, but I suspect he created an environment where people could come and talk to him about some of the challenges that they were facing, and they would get a hearing from him about that. And it's interesting your point about creating psychological safety, because if you don't, people then haven't got a way to engage in dialogue with you about how to achieve those outcomes.
Mhm.
So it's a really
Absolutely.
interesting historically. I wonder whether he was the kind of person that was really doing that. But that was one of the reasons he was so successful.
No, I get that very same impression when I read about him as well, that he listened
Mm,
more than, and he asked good questions. He was engaged more than just, I'm going to engage in being engaging on people and telling them exactly what to do, is what's happening, give me the feedback loop, give me the information I need to make a concrete decision. This is, it's when we look at leadership and people in business too, this is the I have an open door fallacy of my door is open, you can come see me anytime. Unless that leader goes through the door first, crafts the relationships, starts the conversation, builds the expectations around conversations, nobody's ever going to use it.
mm, mm. Let me take one step. You mentioned a second ago about people, creating this, or we talked a second ago about creating the space to focus on the business, not just in the business. I mean, to
Mhm.
quote the cliche. I mean, what are your thoughts on? I mean, we're stepping away from the kind of psychological safety, emotional intelligence bit at the moment. What are your thoughts on the approach that businesses often don't have or don't do very well in terms of strategy development? I mean, you often
Mhm.
see people, they create a strategy, it works for a while, market expectations changed or the technology changed, and then they stumble. I mean, what are your thoughts on that kind of strategy part in terms of how we teach or how we develop people so that they understand how you
Mhm.
build a strategy over time for a business?
Oh, no, certainly. Good strategy is problem solving. It's not a 5 year plan. It's not a discrete document on here's exactly where we're going to go. It is the broad spectrum on here's where we want to go. Here are the tools we have at hand. Here are the challenges that we foresee right now. Here are our initial thoughts on what that engagement is going to look like. And here's how we can adjust and have that scenario planning built in so that if we do see A, B, or C happening, we have a few contingencies. Military, we called it PACE. We had primary plans, alternate plans, contingency plans, and emergency plans if everything else went wrong. And so
That's
you go
quite a
into
useful
your,
analogy, actually, that pace
no,
that idea.
but and you look at, and none of those contingencies were ironclad. It wasn't if exactly this happens, then we do exactly this. It was if this objective becomes more difficult, here are the ways around it, or here's an alternative path that we can look into taking. And so you prepare a much more robust framework for development than a straightforward linear timeline of development.
But what you're saying to me is that in the process of trying to develop a strategy, you think about the different scenarios, things that
Mhm.
might happen or might not happen, and the potential impact of that. Now, that is a very different way to approaching planning to what you see mostly with
Mhm.
people having detailed business plans,
Mhm.
with financial projections down to the last, few bucks. I mean,
Mhm.
they're very different approaches, aren't they? And again, one of the things I'm interested in is why, and perhaps it's because in the military, they're perhaps less worried about wasting money than, if it's your own money, you're probably a bit more concerned about wasting things. I mean, wasting money occasionally. I mean, I'm wondering why do you think that, you know, there's that more sophisticated planning process in the military?
Mhm.
And that's perhaps not, again, you don't see that developing so well across small businesses. I mean, what's your take on
Mhm.
why that doesn't happen?
Again, when we look at global businesses, is are we measuring the right things?
Yeah.
Net at the end of the, net profit at the end of it is we need to make sure that we stay in the black. But understanding all the measurements that get us there is one of the more important pieces. I've talked with a lot of HR people recently, and a big HR metric that we have here in the US is completion rates for training.
Mm.
Did X amount of people, do we have 95+% that have completed the requisite training? That's not a good metric. That's not a good leading indicator for the effectiveness of that training. What you need to do is go to your operations folks. So for example, if you have safety training for OSHA here in the US and you want it for workplace safety, people have to go through that. They have to understand here's the processes, here's the policies and everything that we have to do. Here's why it's so important because we want to keep you safe. But being able to objectively forecast what the effectiveness is going to be, how much of a reduction in downtime in that going to be, how much more can we avoid any workplace incidents and the associated costs with that, and putting those financial metrics to it. We have to be sophisticated in strategy. It's not just having the kumbaya, we have a good plan, but here are the outcomes, here are the effects that matter, and here are the pieces that lead up to it. So being just as granular about proving ROI, about proving effectiveness, about tracking the correct leading indicators of what we need to spot for the long term so that we can ensure that this is a good profitable decision, or that this investment is going to have a good return on it over time, and that we have that
Mm.
ability to track the matters before failure
Yeah.
occurs.
I mean, again, you've hit on a really interesting point. I mean, what I see, that indicator you mentioned, I mean, completion rates for
Mhm.
educational programs, right? I mean, in one sense, that's a valuable indicator, but it's valuable to the university or the college or the school.
Mhm.
I think what's interesting is what are the indicators that are valuable to the customer. So how does, because what the completion rates tell you is these guys have what proportion of people have completed. That's a really useful thing for the university to know. If you're an individual student, I mean, you don't really care how many other people have completed. What you want to know is what are the things that are creating value for me, which are a different set of indicators potentially. And
So,
you see that in business, people focusing on indicators that are not about the things that create value for the customer. They're the things, if you like, that create valuable for the business.
mhm.
And I think that's an interesting area because the indicators of what makes it valuable for the customer are perhaps a bit more difficult to measure in
Mhm.
simple terms. They often require evaluation rather than just simple numerical measurement and so on. I mean, that is a big challenge, I suspect.
Oh, it's a huge challenge. And it's one of those I see when you look at the divisional head, the director level, the VP level, they have ideas for things they want to implement. But so many times I see those ideas being passed forward is they're great metrics for their silo. They're
Yeah.
great metrics for this is how it's going to affect my division. This is how it's going to help us. And they miss out completely on tying it into the broader organizational aspect. Here's how it's going to affect productivity. Here's how it's going to affect customer retention. Here's how it's going to affect acquisition costs. And being able to translate that into an executive perspective and a strategic perspective when applying it upwards. So helping people, this is another one of those feedback loop areas and those mentorship opportunities. As you have people who want to implement programs, help them understand and bridge those silos so that if I'm in HR, I can talk to the operations guys to know what they're actually looking for my training, and how my metrics will link into theirs, will link into the organization's overall big picture.
Yeah. I mean,
Being able to do that, Shane.
it's a very interesting. I mean, I was talking to somebody a while ago, and they were talking about the introduction of these automatic tills, checkout tills into supermarkets.
Mhm.
And they were saying this makes us more productive and from their point of view, they are productive because they don't need so many staff. But
Mhm.
it's all they've done is they've shifted the responsibility for checking out to the customer. So it's not actually removing a component of the process that isn't needed. They're simply shifting the work to the customer. And then they're saying, well, we're more productive. Well, you're not
Mhm.
really more productive.
Not
It's not
really,
from
not really.
the point of view of the customer. It just means you need to employ less people. So it
Mhm.
also, those measures can skew people's thinking about where you really need to innovate. Because, I mean, it
Yes.
was interesting. Amazon tried to remove the whole checkout process, didn't they? I mean,
Mhm.
they haven't actually been that successful. But to go into an Amazon store, you don't have to check out. You just put the shopping in the
In
basket and
theory,
off you
that
go.
was.
So they've removed a step from the process. Now, if that had been successful, I don't know how successful it's been, but if that had been successful, that's making the process more productive for everybody.
Mhm.
Often, if you don't get those things right, that doesn't happen. So you've made a good point there. Let me pick up something you just mentioned, though. You just talked about mentoring. Now,
Mhm.
I think mentoring is a great thing. I've had a couple of great mentors in my career, really powerful model. Somebody helping you figure out how to do your job better. It seems to me to be a really good thing. When you look at mentoring in most big organizations, it's not measured. I mean, there's lots of mentoring going on, doesn't, and sometimes there are processes for matching mentors and mentees, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Is there any measurement of how effective of that? Again, I don't see that. I mean, what's your take on how you change those sorts of leadership
Mhm.
processes?
No, exactly. I agree with you. Mentoring is one of the most powerful forces.
Yeah.
And the best part for mentoring for me is knowledge transfer. Is I love when you have the seasoned and the new, and you're able to pass along all of the nitty gritty of the organization, the stuff that's not in the employee handbook or that's not in the
Yeah.
training manual. That's the real value of mentoring. And what we see with that to measure it is it's an acceleration on the learning curve is people gain competencies that much faster and they're that much more well prepared for whatever level is next. And so being able to measure that time differential in building mentorship programs, I see is probably the bigger leading indicator on its effectiveness on being able to say, okay, it takes us typically this long to spin up an employee, to have them prepared within the management track for these 9 months. If we can apply a mentor, can we see that condensed down to 6 and them being just as effective at implementing a program implementation or project management, whatever it is that they're coming into. So I think that's the piece. The other side of mentoring is being able to handle all of the edge cases. We know as a leader, eventually we're going to have that problem conversation with somebody. We're going to have that uncomfortable moment to provide poor feedback to give people a constructive learning opportunity. And having that mentor makes those conversations a lot easier because you're able to bounce the ideas off somebody first. If you have a good mentor that's willing to role play with you, even better. And what we see as a result of that is we can look at the outcomes of those pieces. And that can be an employee turnover metric. That can be a thing we see in exit interviews about management, sentiment about managers. Looking at those indicators for the effectiveness of that knowledge transfer into how do we have crucial conversations? How do we lead people in difficult circumstances?
Mm. I mean, it also strikes me that mentoring is part of a mix. I mean, these things often
Mhm.
aren't things that stand alone. I mean, things like mentoring, action learning, immersion program, all the other things that go on. It
Mhm.
seems to me that the trick, again, tell me if I've got this wrong, my interpretation is that the trick is getting the mix right rather than any one thing. I mean, how do you see that? And how do universities in particular, because obviously that's where you're based, that's where you do your
Mhm.
research, how do universities help businesses get that right?
Oh, certainly. I think there's three main components for businesses to implement. First is understanding that this is long term. This is not something that is a
Yeah.
quick fix. So having that extended timeline for looking at incremental change over time. Second is making that change incremental, is building those micro habits and giving people progressive stress. Being able to say, this is the first change we're going to take. This is how we're going to implement it. We're going to build in this mentoring program. We're going to expect conversations every so often, and we're looking for these long-term outcomes. which is the third piece to include, is find those good leading indicators for effectiveness. It's not just that the program was implemented, is what are you looking for as a long-term outcome as a result of people doing that program? So being able to extend that timeline, build in the small changes over time, which also builds a lot of the fear or the eye rolling around, oh, here's another change management guy, as well as being able to say, here's the actual measurements that matter. It's not just completion rates. It's not just attendance. It's how are we looking for this to affect the organization, and what are the measurements that we're looking for in the long term?
Yeah. I mean,
if
you
we do
picked
those
up,
three things.
yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. I mean, you picked up the point about change management. I mean, it seems to me the current environment, we've never needed good change management as much as we do now, because things are changing so quickly, and there is tremendous, as you just pointed out, people roll their eyes when you say change management to them, and people are really
Oh,
cynical about that.
I've got some interesting stories about showing up as a consultant, I can say.
Yeah, no, well, having been a consultant as well, I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that though? Because I mean, customer expectations are changing. The technology is enabling us to do stuff that we couldn't do relatively recently. It was changing really quickly at the moment. And yet people's cynicism about change management has probably never been higher, would be my guess. I mean, that's an interesting gap to bridge there.
It is an interesting gap, and it's an unglamorous gap. Because this is so small scale, it is understanding and having the tactical patience that this is the nitty gritty changes we need to make, and being patient with implementing that. And at a higher level, if you implement the right things in the right order and give them patience to sit, you don't ever see that feedback from down below where people are rolling their eyes about it, because it becomes just natural. They see that it's being espoused higher up. They can see that they have exemplars for the changes that they want to have made. And now we have a solid example. We see, small little changes over time. And 6 months later, you can look back and go, wait a minute, what happened? And so it's really unglamorous. There's no shiny piece to it. It's, having progressive practice over time in order to execute on it. And for the massive change we see, this is where we go back to our strategic conversation. Wayne Gretzky from hockey was, I skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's at now.
Yeah.
And
Which
so
is
if we're going to take
it's very easy to say. It's a little
very
bit
easy to say,
to do,
but having those strategic planning conversations to get to be okay, we're seeing this change. We're seeing AI. We're seeing customer demographics shift like crazy. Where are they actually shifting to? Not where have they shifted? Where are they shifting to, so that we know where we need to be in the future, versus we're going to skate to where it's at right now. It's going to take us 6-9 months to get there, and then we're still going to be behind the curve. No, we need to get ahead of it. And that's part of our planning process, part of that scenario-driven piece, where we're able to say, brainstorm, look at the data, and make good estimates as to where we need to be, not just what we're going towards.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. One of the things that I think that people misunderstand about strategy is that my view is that strategy is about helping you overcome the obstacles that stand in the way of you achieving the goals that you. Now, the goals will stay the same.
Yes.
It's the obstacles might change, because now we've got a bit of technology that will do this, or customers aren't bothered about that anymore, or whatever. So the obstacles change. The goal shouldn't really. The thing that you're trying to achieve should be reasonably static, I would have thought.
Yes.
But most people don't understand strategy in that way. They often conflate a strategic plan with a sort of a detailed document of we need to do everything, which is the kind of business planning fallacy. How do you move people? I mean, it's a kind of cultural shift, really. I mean, how do you move people from this, I want to have a detailed document, to we need to be able to flex and respond to a rapidly changing environment? There's a big shift there. What's your take on how you encourage people? Because that's, again, it's a mindset shift as much as anything.
It is a mindset shift. And it's a hard mindset shift, especially when you're used to doing the same old, same old. What I find for overcoming that is helping people see sort of the long-term piece, and the obstacles are going to change all the time.
Yeah.
The way we've developed, the way we've grown leaders throughout history has been practice, has been unglamorous, has been beating the trail for many, many years before they, and understanding that. And for a lot of leaders, especially senior guys in organizations, they've walked those roads before. They've gone through those crucibles, they've gone through those challenges. And it's not so much a framework in helping them change, oh, we need to strategically look different. It's we need to make sure that our people have the same learning opportunities that we went through, not solve the problems for them. And so the shift in mentality on strategy becomes, we know where we want to go. We know we're going to have all these obstacles. I've overcome a lot of obstacles to get where I'm at so far. Now, how do we set the frameworks to continue to beat obstacles when we don't always know what those obstacles are going to be? Yeah. And so what I've seen has mattered. Here are some of the best practices and what I've learned and what I can pass on. But how do I equip people? How do I train them? How do I build the iterative learning for them over time so that they can have the same opportunities to go after their obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting challenge, I think. And one of the other reasons it's interesting is that we often can't see our own weaknesses. I mean, one of the great things about being old is that you realize when you look back over your life, you think, well, I've consistently done those things well, and I've consistently not done these things particularly well. I mean, you get a sense of what your strengths and weaknesses are when you get to my age, right? When you're young, I mean, I didn't have a clue really when I was younger, you know. So there's also something in there, not just about the kind of planning or the looking ahead. There's also something about blind spots, which I think is quite interesting. And again, it's very easy to say we all have our blind. It's much more difficult to help people resolve those, isn't it? Or even to believe that that is the case. I mean, what's your thoughts about that kind of agenda? Because again, it's quite a tricky thing in terms of how you develop as a leader.
It is. It's giving people the time to reflect. Another one of the great challenges we see is we always say people have to go through the crucibles, people have to learn through their experiences, they have to go through that hardship. When we set conditions for people to do that, and here's the other side of the organizational challenge there is if we're going to challenge our people, if we want to give them that agency, if we want to build that area of learning, we have to have the support structures to help people through it. And that's the most valuable part of that support structure is giving people that time to reflect. Because what happens psychologically is if we just face challenges and feel burnt out and face challenges and don't see the change, we disconnect. And we don't adopt that learning mentality. The mentorship comes in helping people adopt the learning mentality and helping people take the time and reflect and having that tough conversation with them. That didn't work so well for you. What can we do better next time? And that's where the mentorship comes in. That's where having good leadership examples comes in that is willing to give people those types of opportunities. And the organizational risk is that it's time consuming, it's slow, it can be aggravating. We want to mitigate any potential losses as we give people those challenges, but we have to give them those challenges if we want them to grow. And we have to have the support in place as they go through those challenges if we want them to grow.
Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of short-term, long-term thing, isn't it? In the short term, people think, well, I've got too many other priorities. But in the long term, if you don't invest in those areas, you'll suffer. I mean,
exactly.
Quite a lot of evidence to support that thesis.
Oh, certainly. I mean, we all see the dinosaurs steering ocean liners, and it's change when you get that far along. It is very, very difficult. But if you build it in time and you build it over time, where it becomes an automatic piece for your business, that is, I would argue, as a strategist, the ultimate competitive advantage because it can be self-sustaining.
Yeah. Ed,
and you're not worried about a certain market condition. You're not people building.
Sorry, I'd lost the sound then. Say that last thing again. Sorry.
No, certainly. This is when we look at from a strategic perspective, this is the ultimate competitive advantage because it's self-sustaining. And because we have people building future people in the organization, leaders building future leaders, that's self-replicating. Any other competitive advantage out there, if we have a certain technology, if we have a patent, if we have certain customer demographic, if we have a great marketing campaign, can all eventually be imitated, wears out, other changes are going to come into place, and we're going to have to adapt. If we just build our people to be adaptable, Now, no matter what comes up at us, we have an advantage because we can pivot, we can change faster, we can stay ahead of the curve more reliably because simply our people just have that mindset, have that attitude.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you use the word adapt because, to come back to the change piece, I mean, one is change imposed top down for some imperative, we
Mhm.
need to adapt, adopt this new technology or whatever the change is. The other thing is individuals feeling positive about change, isn't it? And about
Yes.
wanting to learn,
Mhm.
being curious. I mean, one of the things that I often look for when I look to see whether people ask questions.
Mhm.
And I do worry actually, lots of young people coming out of university they're very good at saying how good they are about things. I mean, you look on LinkedIn, there's some sort of 22-year-old who's done everything. And you're
Mhm.
thinking, wow, that's incredible. How have you done that in 2 years?
Yes.
I haven't done that in my entire life. So they're very good at talking about what they've done. Often, though, they're not as curious. They seem to I mean, I don't know why, but I mean, and perhaps I'm being unfair. I am perhaps being unfair, but the question was behind that was what is it that universities can do and educational organisations can do to encourage that curiosity? Because in an employment situation, being curious, being willing to learn is kind of a superpower. Those are the people that really do well in organizations because they're up for it, they're interested, they're engaged, they lean into things, they pick up skills quickly, and that's underpinned by curiosity. What is it that we can do to encourage that, do you think? And not just in employees, but in leaders as well. So it's a really important leadership thing, I think.
We learn behaviors by mirroring. And neurologically, psychologically, as human beings, when we see behaviors, we want to mirror that behavior. And so, giving people the good examples of somebody who asks good questions, giving people the example of what a strong mentor looks like, that gives them an example of what to do. And now they can start thinking about that. If we say, oh, I just wanted you to be more curious, how do I be more curious
Yeah.
without having a reference point for that? And so, again, going right back to the mentorship, going right back to the executives being exemplars helps a lot in that regard. From a university perspective, for us professors, is pushing them to ask questions, is not allowing them just to make rote answers, is giving them
Yeah.
more experiential pieces, especially for this generation who wants experiences to find ways to solve problems and to find ways to adapt and force them into some of these difficult scenarios where they are making choices and understand that in order to make a better choice, I need to be more curious up front so that I know what all of my different options are.
Mm.
So from a university perspective, really just, again, that's the time for them to test ideas and for them to learn and grow. So give them a lot of room to do that. From a workplace perspective, give them solid examples of what behavior is expected. It's not just rote. It's not just turn in the report at the end of the week and you're done. It's turn in the report. What were we really saying in that? And is there something that needs to be said?
Yeah.
And ask, and having them willing to ask that of it, not just thinking it's a
Yeah.
rote piece of work that we have to
Yeah.
do.
I mean, there's a curiosity thing. There's also a skill thing, isn't it? And this is knowing how to ask, open questions or
Yes.
whatever. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a skill thing
No,
there because you can be curious, but if you don't ask the right questions, you
exactly. If
know,
you don't ask the right questions and being, as the mentor there, it's being patient with that because
yeah,
it's a hard skill to learn.
yeah,
It really is. It's a hard skill to learn. It's uncomfortable. It's just mentally very difficult to get there. So as a mentor, why, what do you think about that? Well, from your suggestion there, we've tried something like that in the past, and here's how it worked, and here's what happened. What about yours is going to be different?
yeah,
And from a mentorship perspective, when you ask that kind of an open-ended question, and this is as a professor, even I don't cold call, I'll just leave the answer hanging in the air until finally somebody raises their hand. And there have been palatable, uncomfortable moments of silence,
yeah,
but giving them that opportunity to think it over and provide at least the start of an answer. And then not shooting them down. Okay, that's close. What about this? Do you want to help them out and get help from the other side of the classroom? So giving people good examples, showing them what good questions are, showing them what good support through those questions are and helping them learn, that creates the impact.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important as well, not just in a sense of the universities produce employees. It's clearly important in that situation, but that questioning thing underpins
Oh
entrepreneurship,
yeah,
doesn't it?
it
You know,
does.
the people that are successful as entrepreneurs often they start out with some question. Why does this happen?
Why?
How do we figure out a way to fix it? You know,
Mhm.
um,
it, it's it's a passion point. It's
yeah,
something they've developed a deep curiosity around. And the best entrepreneurs I've known and the best guys I've known who've gone on through big deals with tech stars and all that have been those that were willing to question a problem and explore how to solve it and be curious about resolutions, be curious about implementing solutions and taking, they go on Techstars, they get the big check or whatever. It's a nice moment on stage, but it's 10 years to get there. It's
yeah,
7 years worth of hard work. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't glamorize all the hard work. So being able to understand that, no, there is a deep process and deep learning in order to get to those points. It's not just something that's automatic. It's not this something that's a switch that throw something out there and magically some VC is going to pick you up. It's no, it's a deep rooted curiosity. It's a deep rooted passion to get to that point.
yeah. Let me ask you a couple of final questions. So we've talked about the importance of curiosity and how that kind of drives performance and problem solving and all the rest of it. We've talked about psychological safety and creating an environment in which people can ask questions, make mistakes, learn things, and the importance of that. We've kind of talked a bit about strategy and the importance of understanding those things in that context. If people aren't asking the right questions, they won't end up with the right strategy. If there is an
Yes.
environment where people feel able to do that, you won't end up with the right approach.
Mhm.
One of the things that's interesting to me at the moment is the way AI is going to shape down, the way AI is going to change things. We've talked a lot about stuff that's good practices. How do you think we need to change the way we work, we educate people? How do we need to change you know to equip people for an AI dominated world, which it's almost here now. I mean, um, I
It's huge.
still see I still see universities teaching relatively traditional things that will be obsolete very quickly. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? How the sector adapts? How do we adapt
Mhm.
learning and development to be more AI accommodating? If that doesn't explain it very well, but you
So
see my point.
no, no. AI, I don't think it's a matter of being accommodative. I don't think it's a matter of it being dominant. It is ubiquitous. It is everywhere,
Yeah.
and we're all talking about it. But it's a tool. And I tell my students the same thing when we come into class is we will be using AI for some things, but we're using it in a controlled manner because it's a tool. I'm not going to hand you all a chainsaw, tell you to go outside, chop down those trees without giving you safety guardrails and explaining how it works. That's exactly the same thing we're going to do here is understanding, just like any other tech implementation within our businesses, this is a new tool we can use. How do we use it effectively? How does it integrate in our processes? How do we train people about it for the right and the wrong? And we take those hard steps and don't just bolt Copilot onto people's email and say, here's your new email companion. It is, here's your new email companion. Here's some of the ways that people have used it. Here are some of the use cases that we've seen it works really well. Here are some of the ways we've seen it integrated into people's job processes. And here's how you can do that yourself. And then allowing people the freedom to work with it and have some knowledge around it before just throwing it at them. Unfortunately, like so many other tech implementations I see, people just think it's something we throw out there and it's a solution. And it's not. It's a whole other tool. And just like learning any other tool, we have to learn how to use it effectively. So giving people the time and the training and the patience and the know-how of being effective with this tool.
I mean, your point is well made. I think the point about patience is particularly important because people
Mhm.
make mistakes, don't they? I mean, learning is not a linear thing. You don't start here, start at A and get to Z.
Exactly.
It doesn't work
Mhm.
that way, does it? I mean, people go
No,
down
no.
the road, they get things wrong, they want to try things out in a different
Mhm.
way, they experiment. I mean, learning isn't a linear
Yeah.
thing, is it? And we often forget that. I think. Um, so very, very interesting point you made there, Ed. One final question. Now, I know you're writing a book at the moment about all this stuff that we've been talking about. I mean, just tell, I mean, what is it that you're excited about coming forward? I mean, you've got the book. I'm sure you've got other things. I mean, tell us what you're excited about that's kind of on the horizon at the moment.
For me is continuing to talk about this. So having the book out there gives me a whole new way of kind of condensing my ideas into a format for people and having further conversations, being able to help people implement this in their organizations. That it's one of the hardest things we can do as people is to be patient, to make things more granular, to do all of the unglamorous work that happens behind the scenes if we want to be successful in new and different ways. And so for me, my most exciting piece is just to continue the conversation. Is this is human. This isn't something that is organization specific. This isn't something that's national specific. This is human nature. And so if we want to build better leaders, we have to understand how leaders are built as human beings and find better ways of building that into our codified processes that might not be as human as we would like them to be.
Sure, sure. And one final question. I mean, if people want to continue that conversation with you, and how do they get in touch?
Oh, absolutely. My website's the best way to get in touch, leadfromthefront.net. Up there, it's my calendar is has links. I'm happy to talk to anybody, to talk about their organizations. I publish regularly up on Substack as well, leadfromthefront.substack.com, where they can find new ideas. And I, especially when I focus on this, is how do we make it happen is the big question I like to answer there. Is it's not just a matter of gee whiz, here's the new theory.
Yeah.
It's here's how we implement it in our organizations. Here's the small changes we can make over time to make this a reality.
Yeah. And one of the things I like about what you do is that you are leading from the front. So,
Absolutely.
you're doing what it says on the tin, as they say, which I
Yes,
really, really
yes.
like. So, Ed,
Thank you.
thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for sort of sharing your thoughts about that. I mean, the leadership thing has never been more important, actually,
Mhm.
both in a business sense, in a political sense. I mean, getting better leaders is really, really important. And as you've illustrated, we've got a bit of a way to go, to make progress on that. So thank you for coming and talking about it. Thank you for sharing that story, and good luck going forward.
Oh no, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate the time on today. Thank you.
Cheers, Ed. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.